Yeah, please do that. Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the DoneJS contributors meeting. Today is Friday, November 16th, 2018, and today we're going to talk about what's going on our next survey. We're going to send out a survey, community survey, within an hour or two. And, well, not an hour or two right now, a couple hours after this gets posted. We're going to ask for everyone's feedback on what the open source team should prioritize next. So
yeah, everybody just cool it. The survey will come.
It will. It will. You gotta be a little bit patient.
All calm down.
With me today, got some folks with better beards than me. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Our familiar faces. Justin, hello. Kevin,
What's up, Jason?
Hello. Matthew, hello. Let me share my screen. Get this party started. I posted in the present to everyone. Okay, I posted in the forums about all of the surveys that we're gonna go through. Kevin, do you want to just get us started and talk about DOM dipping?
Sure. Someone's already clicked on it, so that's a good start.
All right.
It's already some buzz.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, so this first proposal is to incrementally add support for DOM diffing so that people can opt into using it in places in their app where they need to increase performance. So most of the time in CaneJS, we already do very performant DOM updates. You can see in this example here, you've got a for loop over some items, and you push splice a new item into the middle of the array. You can see in this GIF, the only thing that we're updating in the DOM is the one new paragraph that gets added. So most of the time you get very performant updates like that. But there's some situations where this doesn't happen. For instance, if you are creating a new list every time, anytime something changes. So like in this example, we have this items property, and then we have this formatted items property that creates a brand new list anytime items changes. So in this case, if you splice something in the middle, then what happens is it actually re-renders this entire list. So CaneJS can do diffing already of observables if it understands the identity of each object in the observable. So you can fix this problem up here by doing something like this, adding this identity property to each item in the list. But that's kind of confusing, and kind of onerous for users to have to do it. So what we want to do is actually make it possible to do DOM-based diffing, where we would actually see what is going to be rendered, what was rendered previously, diff them, and make the most performant update like we do with our observables already. So this is kind of the strategy that we've laid out to do this. The first step would be to make a DOM diff-based view. So basically a function that would create renderer functions that you could use to replace stash that would use diffing internally. So basically, if you wanted to opt into this, you could update one of your components to use this new diff stash instead of stash. Once we've kind of got that working and ironed it out, the next thing we would do is allow you to do this with a helper. So you could replace your for loops with this diff for, and then just in that piece of your template, you would get the benefits of diffing. The next step, we would make it work with the normal for loop would use DOM diffing as long as you're using normal elements, so basically non-components. And then the last step would be to add support for components. So we would handle things like lifecycle events, dispatching connected callbacks, that kind of thing, removed events, all that kind of stuff. So that is this proposal. If you have run into this problem where either a piece of your app is slow or you've noticed more updates are happening than you would like, then you should definitely vote for this.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. I would say that the only other technically feasible solution is the can derive. But let's go on.
Yeah, we just had Brad join us. Hey, Brad. Good to see you. Thanks for coming on. Can we throw you into the fire and ask you to give us a quick recap of the proposal that you talked about? I guess that was 6 weeks ago.
Yes. If you want to give me 30 seconds to bring it up on my
yeah, for sure.
share my screen. Of course, I'm just joining right now.
Yeah.
How about Kevin does his next one, and then Brad can go.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
Cool. I'll present a second. All right, so the next proposal I'm going to talk about is creating mix-ins for swipe events and for drag and drop events. So we have this project called jQuery++ that has been around forever and is still probably the easiest way to get drag and drop to work in CanJS, but it also has a dependency on jQuery and some other things. And the code's super old, and we haven't really maintained it in a long time. So this proposal is to make these same events available in CanJS without requiring a dependency on jQuery. So these would be mix-ins similar to like the enter event or the radio change event. So something like this, where you would import this new package and add it to CanDom events to make it available. So this would kind of be two different packages. The first one is can event dom swipe, or we could name it something else, but something like that. And this would add swipe events like swipe right, left, up and down. And then once you have that, you'd be able to use it in your template like this. So on swipe right, you could call left, this like function. On swipe left, you could call nope. The drag drop package adds a ton of other events also. You can look at these here. And similarly, that would be available in your templates. You can do like on dragging it, do something, and then on drop on, you could do something here. So if you want to make it easy to use drag drop, and you want to make it easy to use swipe events in your CanJS apps, vote for this.
I will add that with DOM events compatibility mode, you can actually then take these events. You should be able to take these events and make them work just with jQuery and even with Vue. I think Chris even made it work so you can export these things to Vue. So if you use those things too and want them for that use case, they'll work there as well.
Awesome.
Sweet. Thanks, Kevin. Brad, you good to go?
Yes, I am. All right.
All right. You want to share your screen?
On it right now.
This is a proposal from last time. We're skipping around a little bit, but Brad wrote this one up. So
yeah, I'm surprised it was. But apparently, I wrote this up on October 5th. All right, now I can see your your face is in the mirror. All right, so yeah,
we still can't see your screen. Just FYI.
I'm sorry, nobody can see it.
Nope.
What? All right, it's telling me I'm presenting.
We still see your face.
Yep.
All right.
Another good beard, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I started No Shave November in the middle of October. So
there we go. Now we can see your screen.
I started it in 2014, so it's not cheating. It's totally fair.
Well, all right. There's something to be said for being an overachiever, Kevin. Anyway, the idea here is the motivating example is really SVGs. A few years ago, I actually tried doing a reimplementation of something that Swedes had done in React, which was actually like doing a Pythagorean tree that sort of rendered like, progressively smaller groups of squares with a certain offset angle. So it actually like, followed your mouse around and did a tree thing. But I found out that if you try to use a can component method, nothing would draw. And the reason for that is that SVG has a very strict content model. So you can't put just arbitrary tags intervening between parents and children, like like a path in a group or something. And that's a hugely limiting factor in a case like that. And what I ended up having to do in that case was use attribute callbacks. So I would actually just define an attribute on an SVG group that would let me do that rendering and render it sort of transparently. But it got me thinking later, and by later I mean about a month ago, about what we could do to actually make that show up. Because I know that like in the React world, there's a sort of like a component tree, but the component tree isn't reflected at all in the actual DOM when the view is output to the page or page fragment. And obviously for certain use cases, that actually works much better. for the case where you actually have to like have these two distinct DOMs, one for your React component tree and one for your actual output, not quite so good. You know, but it's a trade-off, and it definitely seems to work for a lot of people. So I'd like to explore how we do that, or how we could do that in can component, or with like something like can component or tag or element, etc., where the component tag itself isn't placed along with its content. So my example here is like, this is just using can component, and it's adding a single extra property to can component. So if transparent is true, right, this is a table with table rows, right? So I'm starting with a table, and I have like a perfectly normal table row here. And then I have this my table row group component in the stash. And with transparent true in the proposed model, that would eliminate the my table row group tag from being rendered here. And when this actually gets rendered to markup, you get the table and the two table rows that are in that component stash that are just placed directly into the parent of the component tag in the stash. So there's a couple places where we do things like this already. In CanView import, if you're doing an import, you can actually make a handoff tag, which actually has a tag callback. And while your import is loading, this would, you know, assuming that you're using like a dynamic import here, that's actually going to place the other tag content into that space in place of the import or whatever you're actually intending to render when the import is complete. So that actually replaces the import tag entirely. So that is really similar to what's being proposed here. And then, of course, we also have you know, the ability to send a document fragment back to your markup through a stash expression. And also for HTML strings, if you use triple brace syntax, both of those will actually just put a document fragment, including, you know, any number of top-level nodes, exactly at the point where that magic tag is placed in your source. And of course, the SVG with tag callbacks was what I did. There's a link to the old work. I don't recommend this as a you know, as a guide for how to implement this in the future, but at least it lets you see what kind of workarounds I had to use to make this work.
So, Brad, what do you think the top reason to vote for this is?
If you want to use CanJS to make SVGs and table row groups, you know, if you like those things and you think that those are things you want to use in your app, but you're currently limited by the way that CanJS handles components, then vote for that. Additionally, if you want to make a clean DOM in your production code, so let's say that, I mean, one thing that definitely is a motivating example to me is that if you avoid styling your component tags and only style their children, then you could, in theory, like write your components, and when you go to production, completely eliminate any trace of your can components from the DOM.
Yeah, it would probably be faster too.
Yeah. Right. So a couple pitfalls that you might want to that we do have to work through in implementing this. Without a root element, we do have to rely pretty heavily on doing our node list teardowns correctly to avoid memory leaks. You know, Justin, you're better with this than I am, and this probably wouldn't be an issue if you were working on it. The other thing is that this makes it very difficult to do like CanView model calls. Since the component tag is not rendered anywhere in the DOM, then you can't just, you know, pass it to CanView model and expect it to work unless we have some other registry or like some other like hidden shadow tree of the component tags, which are in the you know, they're rendering their content transparently. Yeah, so we have to make some good design decisions about what to do about that. And then also the final thing is that it's not entirely clear to me where the best place to actually put the switch to make something transparent is. like we could define the component itself as being transparent, but I mean, it might come down more to usage rather than definition in terms of like when you want that component to be transparent. So it might actually be better to start doing like options on the, you know, a sort of like option when you create that component or some other way of calling it that would make it, that would actually like enable that transparent flag so that it doesn't render itself to the output. All right.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you, Brad. We appreciate you coming back on. And again, vote for that if you ever run into places where you're using partials to break up your template, but you'd rather use a component. Seems like a good proposal for that. Justin, do you want to talk about server-side stash templates that support incremental rendering?
I would love to, Chasen.
Thank you.
In short, the proposal is to allow incremental server-side rendering from node-based templates. So incremental server-side rendering is a technique that CanJS or DoneJS 3.0 is using to enable very fast page loads. Essentially, different parts of your page can be rendered immediately, and then we send out mutations from the server. So you could theoretically write a multi-page app, an app that, you know, your standard like Wikipedia or something like that. You could write it with this template, but it would actually look like it loads like a normal client single page app, except that it's going to be much faster because it doesn't have to do round trips for data or for loading the JavaScript payload or anything like that. So hypothetically, what it would look like in Node is essentially you can define your template. This would be a stash template, but we can call it something else. The name doesn't really matter. You can define a template with parts that are going to eventually be rendered. So like here, maybe I've got when the player's promise is resolved, the player promise, this should have been, we're going to write out their name. And then also as we get the player's to-dos or something like that, we're going to write out each to-do. Now this data right here takes a while to load, and it's very nice from a user experience that maybe the user can see most of the header already, can see most of the footer. You've already sent out your style, your link tags, your styles, so they can be loaded right away instead of waiting for all of this data to come back. So essentially what you would do is you would somehow get your players, your to-dos as well somehow. My naming here doesn't totally match. Basically, you get your promises for your data, you render your template, the view gets sent, the HTML gets sent out immediately, and then as your data is essentially as the server gets your data from the database or from whatever backend service layers you have, we will push out updates for that HTML. So vote for this if you're doing some multi-page apps in Node, or you think it's just a cool, way for like CanJS and Bitovi to play in that area, to provide technology that's interesting and cool, which isn't normally the kind of things that we do. And that's it for me.
Sweet. Thank you, Justin. Matthew, there are a few Steel.js proposals. Do you want to walk us through those?
I would love to.
Thank you.
Let's see. Share screen. All right. We're still just doing new proposals, right?
Yeah, just the new ones.
Okay. These are all mostly fairly simple, so it won't take too long. Thanks to Frank for coming up with this idea. So the problem domain we're dealing with here was that you're writing a Steel application, you're using steel.import, or possibly using like the new just import function-like thing, and you're progressively loading parts of your application to prevent large bundles in production. And every time you add a new one of these, you have to remember to add like corresponding configuration in bundle. It still supports the bundle configuration, and this is how it knows where to like split. So yeah, this becomes a problem because you're writing your application development. You add another one, like say you add a product page or something, and then all of a sudden your app breaks in production because you forgot to add this configuration. And if you have continuous deployment, maybe you don't even notice it until it's actually in production, and that's bad. So we thought, wait, why don't we just like kind of infer this information? We can do that fairly easily. As we can. We already do some similar sort of things. This would be a little different in that it needs to happen kind of early in the build process. So we don't have anything exactly like this, but I mean, essentially we do have very similar things where we, this gets turned into an AST and we parse the AST. We can easily find these steel.imports and regular imports and know that this is a bundle. So it's essentially we're going to move this into the bundles automatically, so you don't have to configure it yourself, and that's really nice. It's kind of one of the most common ways that people make a mistake in building their application. So this wouldn't be too difficult to do, I don't think, and I think it'd be a great, just ease of use win for Steel. So if you're interested in that, let us know. Vote for this issue. And that's that one. Okay. This next one is pretty fun. Basically what we have is a watch mode in Steel, which has existed for a really long time. However, we started working on the watch mode before. Where is it? I might have removed it. No, yeah, there's even a guide about it. The watch mode is just a flag, and when you do the Steel Tools build, and by doing, where is it? Oh, yeah, so yeah, it's just a flag that you add when you run Steel Tools, and what this will do is it will continuously run the build while you're developing. So every time you make a change to your files, it will redo a build. But like I said, this happened before the NPM plugin was really took off and before a lot of modern things in Steel Tools. So it doesn't work super well. It's not super fast. It used to be faster. So we want to improve this, and not just the watch mode, but the Steel Tools build in general. We'd like to make it so that you can just run Steel Tools and the build will be super fast. And with the live reload, we kind of inserted a lot of interesting and good caching strategies, but we could take that one step further and actually maybe write some caching information to disk, and that way when you run a new Steel build, it can like pull a lot of information from cache and just do the whole thing very quickly. And we'd also improve the watch mode. So doing all this is kind of with the idea to make a better, faster development experience for Steel. I mean, if anybody's worked on a very large Steel application in development, we do the whole thing. We're basically compiling an entire application every time you refresh the browser, and that can take a lot of time. But this would make it so much faster, just because we would have all these mechanisms to know what's already being done and what's actually changed, and just do kind of the minimal change necessary. So you can very quickly refresh your browser and kind of get that instantaneous feel that's really nice. So this issue is not just about the watch mode. It's about just improving Steel's build time in general and making that into a good strategy for development mode. So yeah, vote on this one if you'd like faster builds, faster development modes. Yeah, vote on this issue. The last issue, I wish Adam was here to talk about it because he's way better at talking words than I am. Adam came up with this issue a while back, actually, about a year ago. So this is a DoneJS issue, specifically server-side rendering. What DoneJS will do when it renders server-side is it will inject links into the head for everything that's needed to load a page. So for example, in the Place My Order application, if you go to the order history page, there'll be a couple of links. And that ensures that there's no like flash of unstyled content. But what it also does is it blocks rendering, because if you have any links in the head, they won't render the rest of the page until those CSS files have loaded. So a lot of people, and I think Google in particular, recommend inlining kind of what they call critical styles. And what a critical style is actually up for debate. What is critical? That's debatable. But critical means stuff that is absolutely essential to making the page visible. This way you can like kind of see the page right away. It continues to render everything. I don't know if you all know about this, but if you put a link tag inside of the body, some browsers, maybe all of them, I know for sure Chrome does, but they'll actually not block the page on this. They'll continue to render the rest of the body. So that's kind of a cool performance trick to know. But anyways, the recommendation here is that to put critical stuff inlined into a style tag and then kind of defer everything else to render more or less asynchronously. So yeah, there's some tooling to do this. And again, what is critical and what is not is kind of up for debate. I don't know if we necessarily have an opinion on that, or maybe we would. I don't know. Personally, I think that like layout is essential. Everything needs to be placed in the right spot, but like fonts are not essential. I'd argue colors are not essential, border radiuses, et cetera, et cetera. Again, this is all debatable, but there are some tooling out there that will examine a page and it will like kind of separate a CSS chunk into critical and non-critical. So the idea is here we could possibly integrate that into DoneSSR, where and again, make this performant, we probably want to do this kind of on boot up, but we would take our CSS and run it through this program, and it would spit out different critical versus non-critical CSS, and that way we know what we need to inline. We would also, and I don't think we do, I'd have to check, but I don't think, maybe we do. If you're using HTTP2, it's arguable that you shouldn't never really inline. You should instead H2 push, because that should get it there in the same, should get there about the same time as inlining, but you don't lose cacheability doing that, but it's just kind of a sidebar. Anyways, if you'd ever done inlining of CSS, or you're aware of it and you think it's cool, it is cool, this would be a great issue. This would be a nice little performance step up for SSR, which is already very performant, but still. Yes, so that is inlining CSS in DoneSSR. I think that's it for me for now.
Yeah, that's it for you. We'll give you a break when we. Yeah, sorry for the 3 in a row. Justin, do you want to get us started with proposals that were in the last survey with the added data guide?
Yep, and this was like number 1 or number 2 last time, but we weren't able to get it, so it goes back on. Please keep voting for this if you still want us to do this. This is a data guide that will essentially walk through from a very low level all the way up to like in terms of just connecting, how CanConnect is used to connect to a RESTful service layer, and then all the way up to doing big fancy things like fall through caching and real time, and kind of how they work so that you can get an understanding of it. There's a lot of rough content in here already, but if you want to understand these layers, vote for this.
Sweet, thank you. Hopefully the survey is this guide's time to shine. Gets picked up. Kevin, can you talk to us about making a simplified routing solution?
Sure. So it's a proposal that was also on the last survey. We want to make it easier to map routes to components. So in all of the latest guides, we're basically showing setting up routing by creating a component for the current route and creating that programmatically and then rendering the component. So that's great. It's much better than a huge switch statement in Stash like we used to have, but it's a little bit hard to set up. So we want to make it easier. So this proposal basically will allow you to create a configuration for each of your routes that says what component to render and then what properties you need from the view model that need to be bound to that component. And it supports nested routes, and it also supports like dynamic imports and things like that. And then all you have to do is create this page component property and pass it to this new router module that CanJS would provide. And then you can just render your page component. So it should make it much easier, and it also should make CanJS's routing system a lot more similar to how like Vue and React and Angular and all of the other frameworks do routing. So if you are interested in seeing a easier routing solution, vote for this.
Beautiful, thank you. Matthew, do you want to do your two, and then I'll do one, and then you'll finish this off?
Let's do this. Okay, so first one is deduplicating less imports. This has actually been on the survey the last couple of times. It was really close to being selected, and if I hadn't been working on DoneJS 3 for so long, so long, I might have had a chance to do this. So this was more like if we have time. It's kind of, it was on the boundary there. So the idea here.
You want to share your screen? Sorry.
Yes, I do.
To interrupt.
Hopefully my emotions were overcoming the lack of ability to see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you were so passionate.
I am passionate. So yeah, so the oh, this is closed. Why is this closed? Okay, okay, sorry, wrong link. So yeah, the idea here. This is actually the worst link. Let's go back here. The idea here, Mark brought this up. It's been brought up many times in the past. Is that when you import things using less, it can lead to duplication because those less imports are not really part of the Steel kind of module registry. They're kind of internal to less. And so if you import a less file in one JavaScript file and then import the same less file in another JavaScript file, those are split. But when you start importing within less files, those all get duplicated. So we've had a couple of ideas. One idea to fix this is to kind of run everything, the entire page's output into like one bundle, like just create one CSS file for the entire page load. And that would cause everything to be properly duplicated. We've had some more advanced ideas, which are kind of like maybe get an AST out of the less, and from there we could kind of pick out things like variable, things we know don't lead to deduplication, and those are the things that we can kind of move around and whatnot. Anyways, I'm not really sure which one we would do if this were selected. But if you've had a problem where your bundle, your CSS bundles kind of have repetitive styles, and you'd like to see us work on that, please do vote on this one. Again, this one has been really close to being voted on the last couple rounds, and we might actually be able to get to it if you select it again. So please do. Next is another one by Mark. He couldn't be here today. I've been talking to him about this a little bit, and I find this really interesting. If you've never heard of a finite state machine, a state machine is it's more or less it's a way to represent state as having a limited number of states, and it tells you how to transition from one state to another. And well, this is really nice when you can have these, because it kind of eliminates a lot of bugs, because there are only so many ways. You kind of, you define what your states are and how to transition in configuration. So it's not possible for invalid states to occur. It's definitely more complex than that. Maybe I'm not the best person to describe it, but we have, some of us have run into cases where, this would be useful in their application, where they have these type of applications where there are a limited number of states. So we don't really know how we would do this, but probably something similar to how we have types today, is we might have kind of a finite state machine type, and you can extend that. You could define what your different states are. This is kind of an idea that Mark described here. And Justin kind of expanded on it in some different ways as well. So if you'd like a really nice, compact way to represent, kind of, I don't know if you'd call these more simplistic components, but definitely components where everything is known as you're writing it, I guess. So yeah, if you're interested in state machines, finite state machines, please vote on this issue.
Sweet. Thank you, Matthew. Let me present my screen and talk about a proposal for showing inherited and mixed in values. I'm going to jump straight to the example. This is from can-define map.
You're not sharing your screen.
I'm not sharing my screen. I'm just presenting to everyone. Sorry, guys. All right, let's try that again. All right, this proposal for showing inherited and mixed in values, I'm going to jump to an example from can-define map. So define map, there's a bunch of different constructors that inherit methods and properties from other modules. So an example is can define map inheriting from can event queue map. It inherits all of these things from different listeners and methods and what have you. So this proposal is for showing those for all of the different types of constructors in all of our different projects. So this is kind of a ad hoc solution. Can-define map is something that's used commonly, so we put this in here. But we really want to be able to do this for all different types of modules because there are a bunch that inherit from different things. So our solution on our side, we'd be adding the documentation to all of our modules, and then we'd figure out how we want to display this. If we would do something like having the like what can define map has, where it has it listed in a section in the main page, or maybe that would be part of the signature, or maybe we'd put it in the sidebar. There's a bunch of different ways that we could do this. We would figure that out as a part of an issue. So if you've ever been confused about, why are there no on docs listed, or you can't find the on and off listeners in can define, and you haven't found this section, or you've wanted that for a can component or any other module, vote for this issue. All right, and Matthew, do you want to finish this off?
Yes, last one.
Last one.
Yep. So this one is kind of transitioning away from the DoneJS CLI and just kind of relying on tools that you already have installed, such as NPM. So a little background information. When we first did the first version of DoneJS, we didn't initially want to have kind of the DoneJS CLI. We just wanted people to do DoneJS install or NPM install DoneJS and just get everything they need that way. However, we did need to like run some generators and update some files and do some stuff a little bit more that you can really easily do with NPM install. So we created the DoneJS CLI for that. We want to be able to do DoneJS develop and DoneJS build and DoneJS add component, that sort of thing. Flash forward till today, and if you have any recent version of NPM, you can now do npm init and give it a name, and it will kind of automatically there's a convention to run a type of generator. Like you do DoneJS init, or excuse me, npm init DoneJS app will install and run create DoneJS app automatically. So you don't have to have any special, new CLI. Like I'm getting ready to release DoneJS 3 here soon, and people are going to have to install, globally install the DoneJS CLI, which is lame in my opinion. Additionally, there's this thing called npx, and what that will do is it will kind of install locally something. So, the way that we have DoneJS add, like DoneJS add Firebase and that sort of thing, that could all be done through here. That's just kind of another thing that the DoneJS CLI does that there's today a replacement for. And then, DoneJS develop is really just shorthand for npm run develop. So people already do this anyways. You just don't really need to have that. So if you'd like to see us transition away from the DoneJS CLI and just use npm, that way you don't have to remember to install anything. You just kind of use npm init to create a new DoneJS project. I think that'd be really cool. So vote on this issue.
Sweet. Thank you, Matthew. That's it for all of the new and old proposals. So I think it's I think it's time for us to have some discussion if we want to advocate for any in particular or talk about the proposals or what have you. Do you guys have thoughts?
I think we have a good batch this time. That's all I would say. So, there's none in here that I'm like, So.
I was gonna say the same thing. I think it's the first time I don't have like a #1 favorite. Like I normally know which one I'm gonna vote for. This time
mine is probably Steele's build, because I think that is something a lot of people gripe about.
The faster builds and improved watch mode.
Mm-hmm. Then I think just I would like it. Well, I mean, there's some ones that are just easy, and I like easy things. So drag and drop and swipe events, that's easy because we're basically just taking code that we've already done. The there's another one that was easy. Oh, the incremental rendering one is easy. The server-side templates for incremental rendering, because we've already done all that work.
I hope people vote for Brad's, the transparent rendering of components. I tried a little bit ago, creating a package that had all of the HTML elements as can components, but having those extra elements really makes it annoying. So it would be nice if you could just like import paragraph from something and render that. You could have a stashless app.
What?
Not a stashless app.
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, you could. So what I was working on was a project that implemented all of the HTML elements as can components. So you could.
Why?
I don't know. I was just messing around. Because then for your
main paragraph component.
Yeah, paragraph header.
Why? Oh. What does it do for you?
No stash.
But you don't need stash to write a paragraph.
No, I know, but like you can.
Okay.
Never mind.
It does more than that.
Anyway, hope people vote for that.
That one should be fairly straightforward, except for the view bindings. I think it's one of those things where like, if we could do it in 4 hours if it wasn't for the view bindings.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of that seems like something where you run into little surprises along the way, like, oh, assumptions are made that you have to.
Yeah, I think mostly it's the view bindings, just because we'd have to have a transparent view bindings too, which people have asked for, but like we'd have to make it so that's somehow configurable. But the nice thing when I talk about performance with that one is that because right now we set up the mutation observers, things like that. Like I think Mark was actually asking today, like, oh, you can put stash, like an if, around an actual binding. You could put like if in curly braces something, and then within that you could put like on click do this, and that conditionally adds the clicking. Obviously that kind of stuff, well, maybe we can make that work. I don't want to make that work. Like I would just say no, that kind of stuff you cannot do with transparent, because we don't have the signal from the mutation observer whether that was added or not. So that would actually be great for performance though, because you wouldn't have any of that. So I like that for that reason.
Yeah, I think we'd have to make it clear that it's like, don't put event listeners on transparent component tags, because that's possibly going to really mess things up.
Or conditional bindings too. You could, in theory, have a conditional binding, but that stuff, like, we just wouldn't make work. We could, but it feels like a lot of effort for a very small use case.
No, that seems like the sort of thing we just want to warn people, saying, don't do this. It's not supported.
Does anybody actually have opinions on whether you'd like to see the transparent flag be on the component definition or its instantiation, or both?
I think it has to be on the component definition. Instantiation,
same.
Too weird. Like that to me, the components template is a private thing. So if I'm saying if I want this component to be transparent, that you could have a breaking change. Like it might work inside of a table, but then they change their template and it no longer works inside of a table because now they have something else. You know what I mean? It only works if their thing is a TR. So if they don't have a TR, if they is a TR and it works, and then hey, I change it to not be a TR. Now it's, you know what I mean? It's, I don't know. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I think because I think there are cases where, I mean, because yeah, I mean the components template is scoped to the component, but the actual tag that creates the component is not part of that template. So it really is outside of it, and it's part of the part of the calling template.
The component does decide on its own tag name, though. You know?
I would just say, like, to me, getting it working, I think it's fine if you could pass it in, but I would just say that it's, if you get it working at least on the component, which is easier, so it's a configuration on, like, when you're defining your component, the worst case scenario for people then is they essentially create two components. Like, you have your view model, you have your view, and then you copy them into two components, one that's like named something transparent and another one that's not named transparent, and then you use which one you want. It's not the ideal workaround, but it's like, it's a reasonable workaround that I would say, like, we should just definitely start with it in the definition. And then if people are like finding use cases where it's very common you want to flip, and that isn't really working for them, then discuss it at that point.
All right. One other thing that I didn't write in there that we do need to consider is how we approach modlet styling when the component tag isn't there. Because the less template that we create for a modlet assumes that the component tag exists. So we might want to like throw a bone to the to developers who are trying to create these, if they want to use less in their modlets to, I don't know, maybe if it's like a transparent component, make it like the class that just gets automatically added to the top level children or something.
How does this work in React, right? Like, they just mix it into that first root element, I think. Well,
styling is weird. It's a little bit weirder in React. What they do is they actually create unique classes based on where you are in the DOM. And so your class actually is something you can pull out of the style for the style object, because the style object is technically a form of CSS, but what it gets exposed as is not just a string or a style object. It actually, like, it generates stuff based on like the class name you pass in and where you are in the in like the React component tree.
Yeah, but what I mean is it still relies that you have like it's still adding that to like the first element in your renderer, in your render function, right? It's like, it depends on the, like, because I think, I don't know if React has fixed it. I think maybe they have recently.
I'm not a super expert.
You always have to have a single
right now. But it seems like what's happening is we are adding class names from the style object specifically.
So for just
to the first element in the render.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not automatic. Like, you gotta actually want the class name to be that.
Well, it wouldn't. Done component wouldn't work, is like what Brad's saying, is that done component actually wraps all your styles inside of like the tag name. It kind of nests them. But we'd have to add support for this to done component anyways, the same way we had to add support for leak scope. Like, you have to add a leak scope attribute to a done component. We probably have to add some type of flag to done component, a transparent flag or something. So once we did that, we would just know not to do that nesting thing. The easiest way is just to be like, we're just not going to nest. You're on your own. Make sure you don't mess up.
Or just add a class to all the top level.
Well, maybe.
That doesn't seem that bad.
It seems non-trivial, though. Anyways. That's Brad's.
Good chat. I'm excited for this. I'll get the survey out in a little bit. We'll close it at end of day of Tuesday. I think we're all still around to talk about it on Wednesday. But we might not have like a stream to announce the results until the following Monday or something like that. So that's when everyone here will see us next. Until then, anything else before we go?
Get out the vote.
Yeah. All right. See you guys later. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Participate in the survey. See you guys.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.